Pete and I are going to be discussing a stock that is up 21% today. Obviously an outperformer, but why is it outperforming? Stay tuned to the Rebel's Edge to find out more.
Here we go, Sean.
I'll show you what's out the window, Pete, but the sun's setting over here in Andorra, and a lot of the skiing and racing we've been doing the last few days, we're 7 hours ahead of Chicago. So, yeah. So for me, I think it's just before 7 or something like that out here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 4:08 p.m. But that's pretty cool for being able to get stuff up early. Anyway, is Pete Najarian right over there. Bang, bang, bang. And I'm Jon Najarian, and Jared Wenkman, or Venkman if he were with Ghostbusters. Well, that guy's name was Peter Venkman, I think.
That's right, yeah.
Cross between our Pete Najarian and Jared. But anyway, welcome back, folks. It's great to have you here. Obviously, yesterday we didn't trade. Today we're trading. And Pete and I are going to break down a bunch of the stuff, as usual, that we do every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, where we have trading. So, Pete, should we dive right into Macro Minute?
Let's jump into it, John. Let's get after it.
All right. Well, macro today is that the markets seem that after last week's reports and so forth, Pete, the markets seem relatively okay, but they're obviously easing to the downside after the hotter than expected inflation and so forth.
Yeah, I'd say you described it pretty well, and it's something that we got to get a little deeper, I think, into this earnings season. It's already, we've got a couple of days in. It's interesting to see what we've got here. So far, earnings have been very strong. Revenue, not so strong. And that's what people are kind of juggling with right now, trying to decide, all right, which is more important right now? And obviously, as of today, that's moved around a little bit more. But we've heard from Goldman, we've heard from Morgan, we've heard from more banks. And obviously last week, JP Morgan and all the rest, it was Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citi, everybody. So it's been busy, but we're going to have to see if this changes or sticks with big time earnings and a lot of beats, but revenue that's just kind of languishing.
Yeah, and a lot of it's going to hinge on exactly what we talk about with fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Well, as all of you know, Pete and I are pretty focused in on the 10-year. You can look at the 2-year and the 30-year as well, but the 10-year Treasury was moving up pretty fast earlier today. And when that is moving up, the yield that is moving up over 4% again, that implies that the bond is moving down because they move in opposite directions. 2-year and 30-year were also higher today, Pete. That's my fantastic futures.
Yeah, and it's been like a magnet somewhere near 4%, John, but to your point, it just gets even to 4% or even a little bit above that, and people start to say, wait a minute, I like the risk reward here versus over here at the NASDAQ or whatever it might be, and back and forth, and we see that playing out. Here's one for you. What if I told you that last week we focused on nat gas, and nat gas had made this unbelievable move from, call it, close to 2.5 all the way well over 3. It was actually 331 last week. And here we are today, down 12%. Natural gas has been all over the place. It's a meme stock, so to speak, and absolutely incredible. Keep an eye on this because there's a lot of different names and a lot of different spots in the energy space that really will be triggered off of obviously crude, but also nat gas. So it should be pretty interesting. And the ride has been wild.
Yeah, it sure has, Pete. And energy in particular, probably followed by interest rates and then maybe even volatility have been the hot spots. And by the way, folks, I'm wearing some swag here from the Frankfurt team. The Frankfurt team over here for Interbörse. It's where close to 400 professionals get together and act unprofessional for most of the week. But actually, all kidding aside, there are a lot of big firms, S3 and a host of others, Patronus and so forth, that are big sponsors of the event because it draws people from the Basel Exchange, the Zurich Exchange, the Geneva and Frankfurt and Munich exchanges, the London Exchange, the Paris Exchange. I think 4 different exchanges in the US. There's a ton of fintech people here in Andorra, which is a small country between Spain and France. And it's basically right in between. In fact, Pete, I skied to France today just to be able to do it once. And then we came back and then went down for the race finals for the dual slalom. I'm not in that. I'm going to be in the regular slalom on Thursday. So we'll be sure to post the results. But it really is a fun time, man. Totally cool people. And yeah, very fun time. All right, Pete, what do you think of Goldman Sachs? 51% gain in the last quarter of his most challenging year so far. That is DJ David Solomon. He calls himself DJ, so I will, Pete. And he recorded the lowest profit since his first year as CEO. So yeah, it was 51% gain, but Pete, the lowest since your first year as CEO, it means it's pretty challenging for one of the smartest and best trading firms on the street, right?
It's pretty incredible. When you look at the stock, though, it moved around, John, almost immediately. It moved up, it moved down, and then you start wondering, all right, well, it makes sense. It's going down. And then all of a sudden it starts going back up again. And you say, well, how do I make sense of this? I can tell you how you can do it. When you look around, you see Goldman Sachs, you see it trading where it's trading right now. Is it a little bit overpriced? In my opinion, probably to some degree. I'm just talking about, we always look at different ways, different metrics to look at, especially with the financials. And you start to look at different things. Instead of looking at the PE in the financial world, a lot of the time we just like to look at, all right, so what does this thing look like? What is its book value? And what multiple is that for where it is? And the multiple here is starting to get a little bit higher. So could it go up? Absolutely it could, if they actually can gain a little bit of momentum from what happened at the end of the year. But John, when you look at last year, there was only one financial that did worse, and that was Citigroup when it comes to some of the profits. So they did have a struggling year. They kind of turned it around at the very end, but they were still, for the year, net income was down 24%. That's not a very pleasant number for most of the folks that are in Goldman Sachs stock. However, like I said, that stock is actually hanging in pretty good up there right now.
Yeah, certainly is, Pete. And different business, obviously, than JP Morgan, different business than Bank America. But they certainly hope to be a lot of what those firms are, but they're still very dependent on trading and bringing in, clearing business, being a big business that clears hedge funds and all the rest, but also Goldman gives pretty good access to great information, and that's why a lot of people stay there, I think. Mm-hmm. All right, Pete, how about Vertex? That symbol is VERX. Was almost 9% higher earlier in the day. It was like 23 something on the close last week, Pete. We, of course, didn't trade yesterday. We opened today, it's up $1, and then it's up $2. And now, Pete, it's given up on an awful lot of that, and it's heading towards unchanged on the day. Basically, tax solutions and so forth. The announcement today was, okay, they're not going to take over this company that they were going to take over. They've backed out. Does that mean maybe that people are worried about growth, Pete?
Well, it's an interesting call, John, because like you said, the initial reaction was a nice spike to the upside. It was almost like people were applauding the fact that they were backing out of this whole thing and giving them that and then getting the stock a heck of a lot closer to the 52-week highs, not too far away. 52-week highs about $30. Stock got over 25.50, I think, something like that. So had a really nice spike to the upside, but there is a lot to be said for the reaction that we are seeing now. And I think that maybe they've pulled off because maybe it was a bigger bite than they wanted to take, but they've got some decent financials. They do have some free cash flow, but this is an interesting company, $3.5 billion market cap, not huge, but in the space where they are, is there a lot of money to be made? Doesn't seem like a lot of money to be made, John. So I just wonder if they just needed to back off because maybe it didn't make enough sense, and they didn't want to get into kind of a bidding war with anybody else either. Instead, just pulled out now, decided that we're going to see how this thing plays out. And if we have to do something in the future, maybe we will. But for right now, we're just going to sit and just kind of keep an eye on things over the next year. I would guess they wouldn't do anything within the next year, but maybe after that, they start considering something again.
Yep, I would bet they do, Pete. And maybe they already have somebody lined up. Again, Pete and I don't know that, folks. We do follow unusual flows of stock and options. Both can be leading indicators of where a stock is about to go. If you'd like to follow us and be a subscriber, go to marketrebellion.com/get started. That's marketrebellion.com/get started. All right, Pete, let's talk about Morphosis. So these guys are in the healthcare space, and they've been a pretty volatile stock, Pete. I mean, right now it's a great day. They're up 21%, but they've had their share of bad days where they've been down 21%. And it was very recently that they were, and it was on was it cystic fibrosis, or I can't remember exactly what the problem was that they were trying to solve, Pete, but they have had issues. Some of them, of course, are wonderful spikes to the upside, and others are things that, when you don't get success in these phase 3 trials, they pretty much take you out to the woodshed. And that's what happened, but it's not what's happening today, Pete.
No, as a matter of fact, that when you look at what they've got in the pipeline, John, they've already got one drug that's been approved, and that's good, B-cell lymphoma drug. So they've got one that's out there, but they've got a whole lot more. They've got 4 more actually in the clinicals and at phase 3. So that's just, an approval away from getting themselves into position to get something on the market. So I think there's a lot of excitement. And, after this JP Morgan healthcare conference, there's a lot of things kind of rumbling around, and they've got partnerships already, John, with Lilly and Novartis and a couple other names out there. So do they have enough that somebody's pretty interested in them? That's, I think, where we're sitting right now is there interest in this company to be able to just maybe gobble it up? We know that that's already been something that we've seen a lot of already in 2024. Maybe this is one of those names that actually fits in, but time will tell. It certainly is an interesting company. I think they really do a great job when you look at the balance sheets and so forth. It's not so bad. They do have a big cash burn, but that's what biotech is. You are burning that cash until you can actually get to the finish line, get that approval, and then start bringing in a little bit of cash. But right now, I do like what I see with the pipeline, and I think it could be something very interesting. Kind of fits Novartis pretty well if they chose to do it, but it also fits with Lilly.
Agreed. This is a very interesting space, Pete. And even though they're volatile, which we already described, that doesn't mean that somebody won't take a shot here, because they're volatile for a reason. If they have success, it's a multi-billion-dollar success. If they have a failure, well, they burned a couple $100 million perhaps to get to that point of failure. But hopefully they burned less than that, and they've got a partner to help them out. What about Synopsis, Pete? SNPS. These guys are going to acquire Ansys in a $35 billion cash and stock deal. Software firms, the deal is expected to close in a year. So that's how tough they think the environment is right now, Pete. They don't really think normally outside of a presidential year, Pete, I'd say they would expect this deal to close before the end of this year, 2024. But because we've got a presidential year and many of the folks who want to hold on to their jobs probably are loath to upset the apple cart, if you will, I think a lot of these deals get pushed into 2025. That's what they're saying, but this is a pretty big deal, especially in the AI space.
Yeah, big deal is right. AI space is always going to be something that's huge, John, especially in the environment that we're in right now, because everybody is trying their very best. I mean, I think there's a really good reason why NVIDIA is hitting 52-week highs today, AMD hitting 52-week highs today and exploding to the upside, and even seeing some follow through with some options here and there, particularly in NVIDIA. So there's a lot to be said about the AI craze and what everybody's looking for. So this is this is the reason why I think when you look at this one and you wonder what the biggest move so far in 2024 is in the tech industry, this is it. And this is something that could be very big. But like you said, the approval process and to get over the hump and everything else to get this thing done, that is pushed out in the future. And I do think it's because of the presidential year. So it's going to be interesting to see how this really kind of, ferments over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months to get us to the point. But I think it really is something where it puts together an AI firm that a lot of folks would be very, very excited to work for and look forward to what they can do. Because from what I'm reading about what they're doing together, what they could do together, rather, this could be something very big. And I think a lot of people would be very excited about it. Yeah.
In fact, Pete, I know it seems like it's all fun and games over here, but I was actually talking to one of the engineers who's a fintech engineer, and he was saying that, a lot of what they do right now is when they write a program, Pete, they run it through an AI to find what the bugs might be in the program. And so Intel Ansys, that's what this firm that Synopsis is acquiring, they provide simulation software that helps engineers figure out whether or not their products will work in the real world. Of course, the engineers are going to say, of course it works, but you can throw everything in the kitchen sink at it if you've got this kind of simulation. And that's what many of their customers probably want. All right, Pete. Red Zone Sports. I'm going to be the first to say it. Pete nailed it, folks. He nailed it on the Cowboys Green Bay, because we were saying last week, they've won the last 4 times Green Bay's been down there. And you said, yeah, I think they're going to win outright, John. And you said you thought Tampa Bay would win outright, and they sure did, Pete.
Yeah, well, there's always a good lucky thing that goes on along with that, John. We all know that. So it's not like that's a perfect science. But I will tell you this. We did the same exercise on the show that I do up on WCCO up in Minneapolis. So it was fun. We were going through all the different playoff scenarios and everything else. But I'll tell you, how about we take a look at this, John? The Texans. So what happened with the Texans and why did they do so well? Well, I think C.J. Stroud has a lot to do with that. I think on top of that, however, it's a quarterback that we really did like. We liked what he was doing. He stepped in, but everything always reverts back to the mean. It just does, and who you really are, right? So you throw a couple interceptions for touchdowns, and that becomes a major problem. Turns into a 45-14 rout. But I think Stroud and these guys it's going to be interesting. What do you think will happen, John, when they got to go up to Baltimore? We love what Houston's done. They've put together an amazing turnaround in one single year. But what does it look like to you? Do they have a shot against Baltimore, or is this one just going to be a layup that Baltimore runs them off the field? Unfortunately, I'm probably on that side of it.
It should be that, Pete. It should be that the Texans are a team on the rise, but the Baltimore Ravens are already there. So can the Texans catch lightning in a bottle? Sure. Like you always say, it's an oblong ball. It's not a round ball. It bounces funny. And so from time to time, especially if mistakes are made, Baltimore could lose. But you got to think that they're like a prohibitive favorite in this one. And I love C.J. Stroud and what he's managed to do with the coaches, because that's a lot of it, Pete. Again, we complain about it all the time in Chicago with Justin Fields. It's the coaches, damn it. But a lot of these players are great. I think Stroud is great. But I think Lamar Jackson is the cream of the crop.
Yeah, he's a special guy. And the people who forgot about him and didn't realize, how smart he is, represented himself, got himself one of the biggest contracts in the history of the NFL, and lives up to it, right? I mean, so it's not that he got the money. It's that he got the money and he lives up to the money. That's pretty impressive. How about this, John? The Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs are at home. Good advantage. It was cold. But could you ever see a team that collapses? Because actually, I guess I have. There's 2 of them this year. One of them is Philadelphia, but the other is the Miami Dolphins. These guys, they didn't understand that you actually sometimes got to play football in inclement weather. And you go to a place like Arrowhead where that fan base is absolutely rabid. and they got run off the field, and they didn't look like they wanted to even be there. It was the most pathetic performance I've seen to date when it comes to playoffs. But that being said, they've got to go now up to Buffalo, although they've got experience in this past week. Now they got to go to Buffalo, and Buffalo just got done waxing the Pittsburgh Steelers pretty good. I don't know, John. It might be the year for Josh Allen because Kansas City hasn't really looked like Kansas City. And they looked good against Miami. I don't think they looked great, but they ran the ball pretty well. Patrick Mahomes did a solid job, and they beat a team that looked like they didn't even want to come out of the locker room. So what do you think about that game? I'm going to say the Bills.
Well, I'll say this. Because they both play on inclement weather fields, Pete, and Buffalo did it on purpose. I mean, Buffalo spent $1.7 billion. I can't remember the last time, Pete, there was an outdoor stadium that somebody spent that much money on. Really. But they did it, and they did it to hold on to their advantage. It's what has haunted the Vikings, because are they a great team? Yeah, occasionally they are. But do they have a home field advantage? Only with noise, Pete, only with noise. You know, they're not the loudest, but they can be very loud, so that can affect the other team. But I think it's really just an issue of if you have the advantage that, for instance, Green Bay has. I know they played in Dallas, but Green Bay has an advantage when they play in Green Bay because it's cold. And the Kansas City game was miserable cold, between 10 and 20 below zero before wind chill. So that was miserable. But now you're going up to Buffalo. Could they have another snowfall? Of course they could. But do you really care about snow versus cold? No. So Buffalo doesn't have an advantage in that, Pete. Jason Kelce is Travis Kelce. Sorry, I was thinking of his brother. Travis Kelce has announced his retirement. So, you know, does the team play harder into that? No, it's playoff football. Everybody's playing as hard as they can. We both know it. They don't hold anything back, Pete. Just like that receiver, when you and I loved when he said that, a receiver, folks, tore his ACL almost all the way through in Oklahoma. This is like 20 years ago. And Barry Switzer went to the kid in the second half, and he said, I got to have you. Can you do it? And he said, I'm not saving it for anything, coach. That's the attitude you want. And that's the attitude most of the players in the NFL, of course, have, Pete, is they're not saving anything. They're going to go out with everything they got. You know, again, it's an oblong ball. Can Buffalo win at home? Of course, they should be favored. Is Kansas City somebody who could upset them on the road? Yes, they are.
I got some other interesting ones for you, John. How about this one real quick? So the Packers go down to Dallas, right? And they just wipe them off the field. Now the Packers are going to have to go. And by the way, Jordan Love, and I've said it, I eat my words. First half of the year, I was right. He stunk. He wasn't anything special. This second half of the year, and especially in this game against Dallas, the kid played like he was Joe Montana or Aaron Rodgers, I've never seen a quarterback look that comfortable getting rid of the football for a guy this is really his first year ever starting. And he got this opportunity, and all of a sudden he looked like somebody different than I have ever seen him play. And it's the Dallas Cowboys. They got a good defense. They've got great, obviously pass rushers on that team. They do a lot of really good things on the defensive side. He lit them up. And absolutely just ran him off the field. And it probably costs another couple jobs are going to be gone in the NFL because of what happened in that game. But then they've got to go to San Francisco. And on top of that, John, you've got the Bucs, who made Philadelphia look like a junior high team. I mean, they literally ran them off the field too. And Baker Mayfield just said, you know what? I was the number one pick for a reason. And he's actually looking like a guy like that. It's absolutely incredible what they've been able to do. They've got to go up to Detroit, who kind of won in a very boring game against LA, but they got the lead. They basically held on to it in the second half. So I think they're going to have to do a lot more. But there's a lot of fun games, I think, left for us, John. And I think that Niners game with Green Bay is going to be a special game because Green Bay might be able to hang with them, at least for a while.
Well, one thing, sadly, for both Philly and San Francisco, Pete, is remember when halfway through the season we thought both were unbeatable, literally unbeatable? And now Philly's lost 6 of 7, because of this playoff loss. And San Francisco has struggled against teams you wouldn't think they'd struggle against. So a fired up Green Bay team going in there to play them, I like that game. I think that's going to be one of the exciting games this next weekend. And, as you've already said, Texans and Baltimore, not as exciting, I think. I think Green Bay's got a shot, though.
Yeah, I think so, too. I'll do this one real quick, John. Sorry we did a lot of sports, but it's a lot of fun. We had all these playoffs. It was great. Your Chicago Bears. You were a Chicago Bear, which means you are a Chicago Bear. So here's my question to you. You got the number 1 pick in the draft, okay? Do you really need Caleb Williams there? In my opinion, if I'm GM, I'll take it from my perspective. If I'm GM, I'm like, I don't even want Caleb Williams, number 1. Do I want a different quarterback? Well, that's a different story. Maybe if I thought that somebody else was deserving of that number 1 spot. I still like Justin Fields. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe. But the reality is, I think the kid is actually a lot like C.J. Stroud. And the problem is he doesn't have quite enough around him. But they've got the number 1 pick and the number 9 pick in the draft this year, John. If they use that number 9 pick, they trade down and or the number 1 pick trade down, and at 9, they get whomever they want. And they maybe get 2 more picks from that number 1 pick. If I'm the Chicago Bears, that's what I'm doing, because I'm just going to take the best player left or players left when I get down to picks 9, and maybe I get a 7, a 9, and a 12 or something like that or whatever. Could you imagine? Because that's what Houston did. They had the number 2 pick and the number 3 pick, right? And the number 1 pick, of course, goes to Carolina, but then they get 2 and then they get 3. And they pick a guy who's rookie of the year at defense and one who's rookie of the year at offense. Not so bad. I think the Bears could do that, John. And I think that they could at least build on that team that was better than their record, and their defense was better than a lot of people expected. Offensively, give the guy some weapons. He's got one good receiver, and he's got a decent tight end. Give that guy a few weapons. Maybe he even gets one of these wide receivers. The kid from Washington sort of is lined up to be around 9. They maybe get him from there. 6'3", 220. I think I like that kid.
Yep, I like that kid a lot, Pete. And he was a difference maker even against Michigan. And, a couple times the ball came over the wrong shoulder or whatever, but that kid's a player. And also Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, it's possible, Pete. It's not probable, but it's possible they could get both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you imagine? Because depending what the other teams want in between. But I'd love to get a big a big offensive lineman, Pete. Wouldn't mind another strong defensive player. But again, David Tepper's idiocy is helping out the Bears. And unless the Bears, equalize the idiocy of David Tepper, they're going to be just fine after this upcoming draft.
And I'll say this, John, if they did trade down from that number 1 pick and they managed to get 2 picks somewhere in the first round with the number 9 pick, maybe you get a receiver, but maybe you're able to do that with the other picks that you traded away for number 1. At 9, give me Joe Alt all day long from Notre Dame. His dad's in the Ring of Honor for Kansas City Chiefs, and Joe Alt, father is John Alt. They're like, it's almost like he just got reincarnated or something. The kid looks just like his dad, wears his dad's number, just as mean, and probably a better player even than his father. That would make that offensive line good immediately.
Yeah, because he brings attitude with him too, Pete. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean bad. I mean good attitude, a winning attitude. And probably knows that Notre Dame underperformed. And this kid wants to win. That's the looks of him anyway. Well, if you want to win, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time, folks. Also, make sure you go to itsnotanoption.com. That's itsnotanoption.com, where you can claim our free book on itsnotanoption.com. So go check that out, and we will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time.